Chapter 1791. Yun Luo Red Lotus 6. Su Luo looked calmly at the direction pointed by the little stone. Little stone was really like a deity. Far away, Su Luo saw a red bridge of flames across the air. This bridge of flames was not as simple as ordinary flames, but constantly threw out fires and lava. If this was the case, then Su Luo didn't have to worry so much. When Su Luo got closer, she finally realized the seriousness and difficulty of the matter. Countless soul flames merged into a soul bridge. When Su Luo stood at a distance of 100 meters from the bridge, she could already feel a strong anger and resentment emanated from the bridge, and it launched a powerful attack on Su Luo. Su Luo stopped and covered her ears. This kind of soul attack was a lot worse than physical attacks. Physical attacks could still be dodged, but soul attacks were indiscriminate. As long as they were within the scope of the attack, no one could escape. There are no shortcuts to go now, can only step across the bridge. The little stone knew what Su Luo was thinking, and broke all her thoughts in one sentence. The main reason Su Luo's power climbs all the way to the peak was because of taking shortcuts. Now Little Stone said that there were no shortcuts, she sighed in her heart. But little did the Su Luo know. In fact, the little stone was also sighing at this moment. Could you reduce the difficulty level to a very hard one? Wasn't this the shortest way? Su Luo took out a blood-clotting pill, threw it up high into her mouth. She chewed it a few times before she swallowed it. The pill quickly produced medicinal effect in her dantian. At the same time, Su Luo also fed one to the little sable in case of emergency. In fact, the Emperor-grade blood-clotting pill didn't help much on Su Luo's injury. She just ate it for psychological purposes. Only Su Luo would be so extravagant to eat the Emperor-grade blood-clotting pill like a sugar beans. She had to cross this soul bridge. After making up her mind, Su Luo took a deep breath, put the little sable in her arms, and resolutely embarked on this difficult and dangerous road. The first few steps were fine, the soul attack was not very powerful. But after arriving at the bridge, Su Luo felt pain in her brain. She seemed to be able to feel the fire of those souls, full of malice and hatred. Su Luo took a deep breath and relaxed, then stepped forward with her right foot and steadily stepped on the soul bridge. The soul bridge was not wide. It was only wide enough for one person to pass through. Moreover, the whole bridge was shaking and very unstable. Just after setting foot on the bridge, Su Luo clearly felt that the violence was more than doubled. It's deserved to be called Soul Bridge. Su Luo knew that if she wanted to cross this bridge, she had to take a layer off her skin. But this bridge, she had to cross quickly. Because Little Stone told her that the weak period of the Yun Luo Red Lotus would not last for a long time, at most not more than 12 hours. And now, 2 hours had already passed. Only 10 hours left, the time was very tight. The soul bridge was 10,000s of meters long in twists and turns. At a glance, it seemed that the other side was at the end of the sky. But now Su Luo couldn't think of the end of the soul bridge. What she could do now was to focus all of her attention on her feet. Chapter 1792. Yun Luo Red Lotus 7. Just as Su Luo was holding her breath and paying full attention to her feet, suddenly a strange shrieking sound came from the top of her head. Su Luo looked up subconsciously, so she saw a scene that made her pupils contracted. She saw a magnified face, horror to the extreme, suddenly appeared in front of her, almost face to face. Su Luo's chest suddenly fell, but that was just for a moment. The next second, Su Luo calmed down and completely ignored the strange face in front of her. Hey, a strange sneer appeared on the strange face. It was gloomy and pathetic. If it was an ordinary people, they will surely be scared until they faint. Fortunately, Su Luo's psychological quality was too strong to be affected much. It's still thousands of meters ahead. Su Luo felt a little cold in the back of her neck, and she looked back subconsciously. Another face that was so close to the back of her neck. Just when Su Luo turned back, she almost ran into him. This face was bright red, covered with blood. The eyes were black, dug with bare hands. The blood rolled down the cheeks. What's even more frightening was that his other half's face was actually smashed, revealing the white bone. Su Luo resisted the feeling of nausea, took a deep breath, then silently turned back, silently took out a black face cloth from the space, squarely rolled up, and then tied to her own eyes. Only when the eyes couldn't see, then she couldn't be distracted by these messy, evil souls. Seeing that Su Luo was calmly blindfolded, the spirit on the side were suddenly depressed. But they were not discouraged. Couldn't create a visual panic, but they could create a sense of fear. Therefore, these unscrupulous souls came out in various ways to create a spiritual illusion for Su Luo. However, fortunately, Su Luo could resist. 80% of them could be weakened, and the last 20% could not pose a threat to her. So this was a difficult road for others, but Su Luo had passed by without any danger. About 3 kilometers ahead, Su Luo felt that she couldn't bear it. From this position, Su Luo felt that the resistance in her body had been doubled. The leg that was originally easy to walk was now like a lead, and it had become difficult to lift. At the 4th kilometer, Su Luo had reached the point where her face was red, her heart was beating fast, and her face was as white as snow. There seemed to be an invisible, elastic barrier in front of her. When Su Luo moved forward, countless barriers pushed her back. It was no good to go back. Where could she go? This was only the 4th kilometer, and there was another 6 kilometers in front of her. Su Luo looked up at the far end and sighed. However, Su Luo was not discouraged. She took a Grandmaster-grade spirit restoration pills to replenish her exhausted spirit. She felt that her spirit force had returned to its peak condition. She lowered her body. Her eyes were fixed on the front, then only a slight noise could be heard. Su Luo's body was blasted forward like a cannon. But the barrier in front of her was really terrible. Su Luo couldn't go any further than a few hundred meters. Chapter 1793. Yun Luo Red Lotus 8, and because of this explosion, her body was strongly impacted. Her chi and her blood rushed up. Su Luo held the handrail beside her, coughing violently while preventing herself from being pushed backward by the barrier. Because Su Luo's current situation was like the situation on the sea, just like sailing against the current. It's hard to stop the cough. Su Luo wiped the corner of her mouth. There was blood when she spread her palm. Su Luo smiled helplessly. This was only a few hundred meters, and she had spent all her spirit power. If she didn't have spirit restoration pill with her, she would not dare to do so. Su Luo poured out a spirit restoration pill from the bottle and directly stuffed it in her mouth. The spirit restoration pill took a lot of time for it to exert its efficacy. Su Luo simply sat cross-legged and entered the state of recovery and cultivated. After half an hour, Su Luo slowly opened her eyes. At this time, she started to clear up the exhaustion and weakness, and her body managed to restore 70 to 80% of her original strength. Keep going, Su Luo cheered herself up, and then resolutely took another difficult step. The longer the bridge went, the barrier was greater and the more it doubled up. Because among the souls, the strong and the weak were orderly. The weak were all rushed in the front of the bridge. The stronger the soul, the closer it was to the end. The barrier in front of Su Luo was the result of the resentment and the strength of the soul. So the more they came, the more difficult it was to move forward. It's so uncomfortable. As soon as she approached the 5th kilometer, Su Luo felt that her breathing was a little difficult. A strong barrier surged over her. Su Luo covered the empty space and slowly moved one step further. After this step, Su Luo felt that her spirit power was declining rapidly. Su Luo pressed down her despair and took another step forward. She took a deep breath. This time, Su Luo quickened her speed and rushed forward one after another, 5 steps at a time. But after 5 steps, Su Luo's body was almost faltering, and she stabilized her body. At this time, her head and her face were all covered with sweat, and her whole body was almost soaked as if it had been pulled out of the water. And not only that, what's more shocking was that every step that Su Luo took, her foot would leave a shallow footprint, which was formed by the sweat in Su Luo's feet. However, The soul flames were burning under the bridge, so these footprints filled with water stains that had just been formed, they quickly evaporated and disappeared. Su Luo gasped heavily. 5,100 meters. Su Luo's sweat rushed like a spring, and her whole body was soaked. 5,200 meters. Su Luo clenched her teeth, and her body was somewhat unstable. 5,300 meters. 5,400 meters. Even though her body was crumbling, the small body seemed to contain a huge amount of energy. She clenched her teeth and bit her lips, although she was almost collapsed, but she still struggled to walk forward and never thought about giving up, even if she knew that she would soon run out of strength. This stubborn and unyielding spirit brought tears to the little sable's eyes, almost shed into tears. Its dark eyes was staring at Su Luo seriously, with deep admiration in the bottom of its eyes. Then it clenched its fist and decided to give Su Luo a hand. Chapter 1794. Yun Luo Red Lotus 9. Just at the moment when Su Luo was about to faint, the little sable rushed to the front and suddenly sucked. In the middle of this, Su Luo seemed to see the barrier in front of her stop for a moment. Rush! Without waiting for little sable's signal, this word appeared in Su Luo's mind. Then she moved much faster than her brain did. At this moment, Su Luo's speed almost soared to the highest in history. She was as fast as lightning. Only one white shadow flashed by. When she looked at it, she had successfully run to the 6 kilometer. Because there was a sign every kilometer, it's easy to recognize. Thanks to the help of the little sable, Su Luo could save so much effort in one breath. But the help of the little sable couldn't be repeated, because after it used this big move, it closed its eyes and fell into Su Luo's arms. Su Luo rubbed the head of the little thing pitifully, then carefully sent it into her space. Obviously, the barrier at 6 kilometer was more powerful than the previous one. When Su Luo stood up, she could feel the endless barrier surrounding her, squeezing and ravaging her like a flour dough. Su Luo felt a sense of suffocation. Even her eyes began to darken. The spirit in her body was wasted again. So, in order not to be swept away, Su Luo quickly sat down to cultivate, trying to quickly recover her strength. Later, when Su Luo opened her eyes, she found that the internal injury in her body that had been left by the little sable seemed to have been slightly healed. Does the barrier on the soul bridge have the function of repairing internal injuries? Su Luo thought in disbelief. Just as Su Luo was wondering, the little stone voice sounded at this time. Can't you see that? Do these barriers really help to recover internal injuries? Su Luo asked with a little concern. Previously, she damaged her body and suffered internal injuries. It's not only helpful to recover from internal injuries, but also has a great benefits for your promotion. This time, Little Stone wasn't stingy. He explained it in detail. The fire of this soul bridge is resentful to you, trying to squeeze your spirit power, blocking you here, and then become their kind. You would know how jealous they would be if you succeed. It is precisely because these pressures are squeezing your body as much as possible, but at the same time, they will also continuously enhance your body's ability to resist pressure, so that your strength can be further consolidated and improved. Therefore, this soul bridge is necessary for you, and it is also a good opportunity to test and practice your cultivation. Even on the way to obtain the Yun Luo Red Lotus, there was such a path of cultivation that was most suitable for Su Luo. If there was no one to control in the dark, Little Stone wouldn't believe it. Su Luo had stayed at a distance of 6 kilometers for quite a long time. Now, only the last 6 hours were left, and Su Luo was still a distance away from the end of the bridge. If you really can't do it, then take out the Battle God puppet. In any case, you don't have to use it for nothing. Little Stone suggested coldly. I can hold on. Su Luo's face was red and her whole body was shaking violently, as if she would faint in the next moment, but she still insisted on going on. Chapter 1795. Soul Bridge 1. Because Su Luo knew that this soul bridge would be a rare opportunity to cultivate in her life, and she must never give up. It was not the first time she had suffered extreme pain. Last time, her master tried to improve her physical strength. She endured all the pain. Although Su Luo trembled because of the pain, she still did not intend to give up. At this time, small blood beads oozed out of the pore of her skin, and these blood beads were continuously grew bigger, which would make people startled and frightened, afraid that Su Luo would eventually explode and die. Even Little Stone secretly had a cold sweat for her. But Su Luo herself seemed to be completely unaffected, still moving forward with blood on her skin. As time goes by, Su Luo's life was gradually declining. Later, Su Luo had been dyed red with blood. Su Luo almost felt no pain. She felt as if her body had broken into pieces and was shattered into dust, leaving only a floating soul, walking firmly in solitude. "Stop! Don't go anymore!" The voice of the little stone burst in her mind. However, Su Luo was not moved, and her footsteps remained firm. Step by step, every step she took, she left behind her a bright red footprints. After being evaporated by the heat, these footprints became more and more clear. "Do you want to die?" The little stone angrily scolded in Su Luo's space. In his eyes, Su Luo used to be a lazy and casual girl who could sit but not stand, who could sit but not move, who could walk by shortcut but not by practice. But at this moment, Su Luo even made him stand in awe. But no matter how angry Little Stone was, telling her to stop, but Su Luo's steps were still the same. But the blood on her body was getting more violent. Blood steadily oozes out. Su Luo's body had long been covered with blood. Even a man with the heart of stone like him couldn't bear to look. The little stone knew that if Su Luo continued on fighting like this, her body would definitely explode. So he tried to stop Su Luo. She couldn't stop it. Now Su Luo had a high concentration of mental power, and the soul power was burning. No matter how powerful the little stone was, there was no way to snatch Su Luo's body and then force her to stop. So, Little Stone was angry and anxious, but he could only shout at Su Luo. But the current Su Luo was simply unable to listen. With such difficulties, Su Luo had reached 7,900 meters. But at this time, Su Luo's body suddenly stopped. And then the next moment, Su Luo's body seemed to be ejected by a spring. She flew backward quickly. Seeing that the hard work was going to be in vain, Su Luo's eyes were full of pain. She tried to hold onto the bridge to stabilize her body, but it was useless. The speed at which she flew backwards was too fast. At this time, Su Luo finally seized an opportunity, extended her long arms, and firmly grasped one of the soul flames. The soul flame was grabbed on the neck by Su Luo. He stretched out his tongue and twisted his face. It was precisely because of this that Su Luo's figure could be stabilized. At this time, Su Luo's efforts were almost in vain, because when she bounced back, she had returned to the position of 6th kilometer. Chapter 1796. Soul Bridge 2. Su Luo's heart was filled with bitterness. Then she spurted out a mouthful of blood. She had lost too much blood, and now the blood loss was even more serious. Her body was limp and shaky, as if she would be unconscious in the next second. Am I doomed not to go? Su Luo was covered with a faint layer of moisture. There was a sense of despair in her heart in such situation. This soul bridge, she really couldn't keep going. "I will take you for a while." The little stone shook his head and finally said something he had hesitated for a long time. "Will it hurt you?" Su Luo remembered that this was how the little sable fell unconscious. She didn't want to hurt Little Stone again. "Do you think I'm that kind of self-sacrificing person?" Little Stone gave Su Luo a haughty glance. "You're not," Su Luo said honestly. "That's it." Little Stone snorted coldly. From the angle that Su Luo could not see, a complex look appeared in his eyes. Just after Little Stone said this, he took advantage of Su Luo's mental trance. He quickly controlled Su Luo's body and rushed forward. The difference of Little Stone's strength was more than 1 point or 2 compared with Su Luo. So, to him, the impact of these soul flames was not as strong as Su Luo. Whoosh! The white shadow swiftly passed. When Su Luo opened her eyes again, she looked at the signs in front of her and couldn't help but to be dumbfounded. 9th kilometer? But in the blink of an eye, Little Stone had reached the 9th kilometer? In fact, it was because the condition of Su Luo's body that was so bad. If she moved forward, her body would explode and then turn into dust, disappear into the void. So within the limit of 9th kilometer, the Little Stone had to stop. Little Stone face was neither red nor breathless. He sneered coldly. You see, such a simple thing, but it made you in such difficult situation. This is the matter of strength. Su Luo was stunned. Before Su Luo gave any respond, the Little Stone had already waved his hand. Okay, I'm going to go and drink some water. You can handle the rest of the 1,000 meters yourself. Then, the Little Stone's figure quickly disappeared. He had already entered the space. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. By the time Su Luo reacted, the Little Stone had already disappeared. And in between the Little Stone's monologue, Su Luo couldn't even say a word. Seeing the Little Stone disappeared very quickly, Su Luo suddenly had a bad premonition in her heart. Her mental power explored into her space. When she saw Little Stone again, her eyes were slightly red. How could Little Stone be as relaxed and casual as he said? Now he was already fell unconscious, and his face seemed to be covered with a thick layer of frost, looking pale and terrible. Su Luo's eyes were wet, but she smiled a little bit. She swore solemnly to the unconscious Little Stone. Don't worry, I will never let your hard work go in vain. Trust me. To obtain the first fire in the beginning of the heaven and earth's creation, the legendary treasure, Yun Luo Red Lotus. Su Luo knew from the beginning that this was not a smooth journey, but a road full of thorns, and there would be casualties at any time. However, she had to go. Quietly exiting from the space, Su Luo's attention focused on the current surrounding. When the Little Stone took her soul away, Su Luo felt an unprecedented pressure, like a heavy mountain, pressed against her, as if she would break into debris at any time. Chapter 1797. Soul Bridge 3. Su Luo took a deep breath. There was no way to go forward. All she could do was sit cross-legged and protect herself first. Under the pressure of this powerful force that almost shattered her body, Su Luo suddenly had a moment of enlightenment. At this time, Su Luo entered a state of enlightenment. From the outside, Su Luo looked like a sculpture full of blood, sitting still as if she would never wake up. In fact, it took Su Luo a lot of time. Yun Luo Red Lotus was in its weak period. In this weak period, every second Su Luo spent by sitting like this was a waste of time. But others didn't know, this time, how much strength Su Luo had gained this time. At the 6th hour, on Su Luo's body appeared wound one by one, and her body seemed to be split into pieces by a strike of lightning. The intense pain made Su Luo groan uncontrollably. Su Luo's whole body trembled painfully, sweat dripping on her body, and the blood flowing out of the capillaries. But the sweat that contained salt brought more pain to the wound. What's more, the blood from the capillaries was still flowing out. The sweat intertwined with the wound, which caused it to be itchy and painful. It was the most difficult moment. However, for Su Luo, such pain was negligible. Because for a person's body who suffered from such tearing pain, then how could there be energy to focus on the small place? At this time, Su Luo's body was fighting with the heavens. Under this heavy pressure, just as Su Luo's body was about to be torn into pieces, Su Luo was able to comprehend the skill of the nothingness of space, the space gravity. However, in order to cultivate the space gravity, it was necessary to fuse 128 gold threads in Su Luo's mind into 64, which was a difficult task. But this was also the only chance that Su Luo had. Su Luo clenched her teeth. Her body suffered from an inhuman pain, as if these pains were not imposed on her. It was not easy to merge 128 into 64, but with amazing perseverance, Su Luo really managed to merge it one by one. When Su Luo finally merged it into 64, hum-dash, a whistling sound pierced the eardrum and reverberated through the whole flame cave. Time seems to be still at this moment. Su Luo, as if Nirvana was reborn. At this point, The blood on her body became crusted and started to fall off, peel off with the broken clothes. The broken clothes and blood stains fell to the ground and were quickly burned out. At this time, Su Luo's body was in the air, as clean as a baby, as white as milk, crystal clear, exuding luster. Then, sitting on the ground, Su Luo's tightly closed eyes slowly opened, revealing the clear and cold eyes for a moment. She had a white robe covered her body, and the wide robe covered her graceful posture. At this moment, Su Luo seemed to be like the presence of a noble queen. There was an imposing manner, like everything would crumble in her hands. However, that was only for a moment before it disappeared without a trace. Su Luo's figure slowly stood up. She felt as if her body was broken and then reorganized. It was much stronger, as if her body had suddenly been given attribute values, which improved a lot. Chapter 1798, Soul Bridge, for the most direct example, was on the 9th kilometer. Originally, Su Luo wouldn't been able to breathe in here. She couldn't even stand. But now, standing in the same place, she only felt a slight pressure. It was no wonder Little Stone said that this soul bridge was one of the best places to cultivate in her life. If she didn't insist on fighting with her own body, her body and her cultivation would not be promoted this fast, and also didn't know how long it's going to take to comprehend the space gravity technique. Su Luo stood up and looked indifferently at the soul flames, which was constantly shouting at her. These soul flames were watching Su Luo become stronger. At this time, they were all unreconciled and couldn't accept it because they seemed to feel that Su Luo had a glimmer of hope to pass through the soul bridge. Su Luo sneered coldly. After she increased her strength previously, her wound had recovered to its original state. As long as the internal injuries caused by the little sable didn't emerge to cause trouble, her strength should be in the peak state. 9,100 meters, 9,200 meters, 9,300 meters. Su Luo's footsteps were steady, neither fast nor slow. Even if you walk a single step, the body would tremble slightly. When she reached 9,400 meters, Su Luo stopped slowly. When she got here, her way forward was hard again. The overwhelming barrier was like an invisible wall that blocked her in place. There was another layer of sweat appeared on Su Luo's face. However, her indomitable vitality and unyielding self-confidence made her step forward again. At the same time, the nothingness of space gravity technique suddenly spread out, covering her body. The gravity technique that she just learned, this card, was not taken out until this moment by Su Luo. 9,500 meters, 9,600 meters, 9,700 meters, 9,800 meters, and 9,800 meters. The Su Luo stopped for the second time. This time, she stopped a lot longer than before. Even though her pressure had been reduced a lot, but now in this location, the overwhelming pressure and barrier still made Su Luo a little difficult to manage. At this time, Su Luo's feet trembled slightly, and she tried to hold back. Su Luo looked up, and she saw the end of the bridge not far away. At a distance of 200 meters, she was able to see the end. Normally, she could reach the distance of 200 meters in a blink of an eye, but now, it seemed that there was a gap as deep as Mariana Trench, which she couldn't go through. However, how could she give up? Su Luo took a deep breath, clenching her teeth, and continued to walk difficultly under the pressure. 9,900 meters. When Su Luo arrived at 9,900 meters, suddenly, a pressure like a collapsing mountain and a heavy tsunami swept over, and the sudden change almost makes Su Luo bounce back. However, Su Luo had experience. She was holding the soul flame beside her, letting the wind blow and the tsunami roar. 100 meters. Only the last 100 meters left. At this point, all the cards that Su Luo could use had been used up. The only thing she could rely on was her own willpower. Chapter 1799, Soul Bridge 5. Su Luo was having a hard time to stabilize her tottering body and hard to put down her foot. But with such a difficult movement, Su Luo's whole body was sweating because of the pain. She put down her feet heavily and finally progressed another meter. However, Su Luo's skin was covered with a thin layer of blood beads like before. Even with the nothingness of space gravity technique, also couldn't resist these frantic soul flames. Yes, seeing that there was only 100 meters left for Su Luo, these soul flames onlookers were all stirred up, frantic and agitated. In order to block Su Luo, they, who hadn't been fighting together, now were firmly united. Su Luo was like a lonely sail in the sea. Finally, Su Luo continued to take another difficult step, one step further. 9,930, 9,950, 9,970. Every step was as hard as burning a fire. Every step was hard as death. However, Su Luo still clenched her fists, letting the sweat mix with blood, letting the internal injuries continue to deepen, letting the body suffered from tearing pain, and letting the feeling of suffocation surrounded her. In the end, she still went step by step to the last step, 9,999 meters. This last step was as difficult as the heaven. However, Su Luo took a deep breath, and her eyes revealed unprecedented firmness and perseverance. Even if she died, she would take this step. Nothing could stop her from taking this last step. At this moment, Su Luo's eyes were shining like the stars, and a huge self-confidence filled her chest. 10,000 meters. After 9 trials, Su Luo was finally able to pass the last 1 meter and came to the flat ground. In a flash, the pressure quickly faded like a tide. The air seemed to be full of poetry. Su Luo felt that her body was light, as if she was about to fly. But she couldn't fly. At this time, she was sitting on the ground and gasping for breath. However, the feeling of joy made her laugh involuntarily. For the first time, she didn't rely on shortcut, only relying on her persistence and efforts. She laughed all the way to the end. This feeling was really good. Even she was moved. After resting for a while, Su Luo waited for her body to recover some strength, then slowly stood up. Su Luo turned around and walked forward. Because there was not much time left for her behind her, countless soul flames were shouting angrily and scolding anxiously. But Su Luo turned around and left without looking back. The voice behind her gradually went away. But in front, it was unknown what danger awaited her. Was it so easy to get the first fire in the beginning of heaven and earth's creation? There was only 1 hour left. Su Luo originally thought that after passing the Soul Bridge, she could find the Yun Luo Red Lotus. But now she found that her previous thoughts were too naive. There was an endless space ahead. There was nothing, not even a piece of dust. There was only vast expanse of whiteness. Where was the Yun Luo Red Lotus? Su Luo stood in place, her brows wrinkled together, but her eyes was still very calm. Using the mentality of giving a medicine to a dead horse, Su Luo took out a map from her sleeve. What Su Luo didn't even think of. Chapter 1800. The final level 1. This map, unexpectedly, really showed something, and the direction was very clear. Su Luo slapped her head. How could she forget such an important map? Walking around in circles, causing trouble on oneself in vain. But when she finished reading the map, she took a deep breath. She went in the right direction even after she walked randomly. Her luck was really unmatched. Su Luo took the map in one hand and the Chungying sword in the other hand, and hurried forward in a faster speed. Not waiting for Su Luo to go far, suddenly, she felt a strange wind slowly blew across the back of her neck. Su Luo turned back subconsciously. Then she saw a scene that made her horrified. Countless puppets surrounded Su Luo from all directions. These puppets were somewhat human-like, but they were stiff and mechanical. Obviously, they were not intelligent. There was still a big difference from the battle god puppet. Right in front of Su Luo, suddenly, a thick shadow was cast from the air. Su Luo was dumbfounded. Does the leader resemble the battle god puppet? Su Luo blinked and stared at the dignified figure. If Little Stone was here, it could be seen at a glance. This and Su Luo's puppet were definitely by the hand of the same person. The blue battle god puppet's eyes on the opposite side were cold, like frost, coldly looked at Su Luo. Stupid human. The battle gods are not controlled by insignificant human. Accept death. This great god doesn't have a great demeanor. As soon as the voice fell, the blue battle god puppet directly attacked Su Luo without waiting for his followers or descendants to rush in. The huge killing move had not come yet. Su Luo already felt that it was bad. The battle god puppet's killing move was not something Su Luo could resist. Su Luo's heart was a little relieved. Fortunately, when she passed the soul bridge, she didn't use the battle god puppet. Otherwise, what awaited her now would be the end of the world. There wasn't much time to think. Su Luo quickly retreated. At the same time, her slender hands were slightly raised. The battle god puppet, who was still sleeping peacefully in Su Luo's space, was directly thrown out of the space by Su Luo. Before the red battle god puppet understood what had happened, he felt the fierce, killing move on his forehead. The battle god puppet immediately, completely awake. The battle god puppet was sullen. He subconsciously turned his head away, stepped back for a few hundred steps, and then stabilized his body. When he turned his head and saw the other side's hateful blue figure, he suddenly burst into anger. Isn't the river water doesn't interfere with the well water? What are your intention? The river water doesn't interfere with the well water? Ha! The blue battle god puppet sneered coldly and disdainfully, and then made a series of moves. He didn't even want to talk to the red battle god puppet at all. The red battle god puppet suddenly had the same complexion. He was very angry. Therefore, all his life's cultivation and unique skills were constantly shown. They were not equal in strength. Otherwise, they will not be able to tell who wins or who loses in this roaming dragon secret territory for countless of years. Now, the two old guys were fighting again. At this time, the one who suffered was undoubtedly Su Luo. Su Luo had to face a bunch of dead men who had no sense of pain, no sense of touch, and no sense of death. Chapter 1801. The final level 2. In order to stop all these dead men, Su Luo asked herself that this cannot be possible to accomplish. What Su Luo could do was to remove as many mechanical puppets as possible. Fighting one by one was really a waste of time. When a group of mechanical puppets rushed over, Su Luo waved her hand and immediately circled 10 mechanical puppets into her space gravity. In the space gravity, their strength will be greatly weakened. The strength of each mechanical puppets were at least 9th rank. If Su Luo fight them with her real strength and wanted to kill the mechanical puppets in one go, it would be very difficult. But now, after the mechanical puppets were surrounded by Su Luo into the space gravity, Su Luo's wrist spread out, and a cold Cheng-Ying sword appeared in her palm. Cheng-Ying's sword was like a cold spring, tilted down. There was only a loud bang. A number of mechanical puppets immediately fell down. Looking at such a sharp sword, Su Luo herself was a little shocked. Wasn't that a little bit too much? Was the gravity too much of an exaggeration to weaken the opponent's strength? 9th rank. And it was just like sweeping the floor. It was over with one sword move. Outside the space gravity, countless mechanical puppets were circling, screaming towards Su Luo. Su Luo could roughly guess their meaning a little. They were provoking her. Provoking her? Very good. The corner of Su Luo's mouth evoked a bloodthirsty sneer. For a long time, she didn't have a fight. There were too much pent-up anger in her heart. It's better to take advantage of this time to vent. It's better to vent this time. A sneer appeared at Su Luo's eyes, and then she raised her arms slightly. In an instant, 20 mechanical puppets were put in. A white sword flashed by. Bang! Groups of mechanical puppets fell to the ground, some with broken arms and legs, and some were cut from the abdomen. Su Luo didn't stop. Another flash of sword. The remaining 10 mechanical puppets were destroyed before they could rush to Su Luo's side and launch their attack. How mighty! Su Luo couldn't help but snapping her own fingers. It was really great to kill people like chopping a kitchen knife. The mechanical puppet pieces piled up on the ground were taken into her space, and the battlefield was cleaned up again. Then, there was the beginning of a new wave of fighting. It would be a big mistake if it was said that Su Luo had killed the enemy just like a kitchen knife. In fact, there were tricks in killing the enemies. With this rare opportunity, she was taking the time to train her steps and swordsmanship. In the beginning, a sword could kill 10 at most. Later, it gradually increased. 12, 15, and even 20 mechanical puppets died at the same time with the same sword. At the same time, Su Luo was constantly improving her steps. When to jump and when to land would cause the greatest attack power and the highest accuracy. Su Luo was experimenting with these mechanical puppets over and over again. It was great to get these free labor. It would be a waste to use them for nothing, Su Luo thought. Su Luo was busy fighting here. The red and blue battle god puppets battle situation was also stuck. It was difficult to determine who would win or lose. Su Luo was tired from fighting, so she took a break and observed the situation. Chapter 1802. The final level 3 at this time. The blue battle god puppet and the red battle god puppet were standing together fiercely. But after a few glances, Su Luo's face soon turned bad, and the joy she had soon disappeared. According to the true ability, Su Luo's battle god puppet was a little superior in strength. So was the fighting situation. At the beginning, the red battle god puppet had always gained the upper hand. However, the red battle god puppet suffered from the losses, and the spirit in his body was not enough, and the spirit of the blue battle god puppet was abundant. With the blue battle god puppet deliberately delaying time, the situation of the Su Luo's red battle god puppet wasn't very good. The red battle god puppet wanted to resolve it quickly, but the blue battle god puppet kept evading, so the fighting situation was stuck. The red battle god puppet was so angry that each fist contains a strong attack power, but the moves still failed. Su Luo could not bear to look. If this continued, the situation would be very bad. Su Luo tried to communicate with the red battle god puppet, but the red battle god puppet was so angry that he couldn't hear Su Luo's words at all. He still followed the blue battle god puppet and pursued him. Su Luo depressed and wanted to cry. She couldn't understand. The red battle god puppet was quite indifferent at ordinary times. How could he completely lost his mind when he met the blue one? Was there any hatred between these two? Actually, Su Luo was right. If it wasn't for the blue battle god puppet, the red battle god puppet would not have been lying at the bottom of the Black Lake for so many years. So this time it would be madly chasing him. The red battle god puppet was so angry that he shouted and brandished his fist to smash it with a heaven-shaking force. Bang! He smashed his fist to the blue battle god puppet. The blue battle god puppet flew out far and finally fell to the ground, unable to stand up for a long time. Because this time, the red battle god puppet exhausted all his strength and consumed all his last spirit. Finally, the red battle god puppet's body was shaken. Then he fell straight to the ground and passed out. Su Luo quickly walked over and extended her finger to test. As expected, there was no spirit. But fortunately, the final blow finally got the blue battle god puppet, otherwise it would be a big trouble for her. However, Su Luo was not happy yet. Over there, where the blue battle god puppet lying on the ground, sat up slowly, half-seated. Su Luo inadvertently looked up and saw this scene. And suddenly her face was a little white. The blue battle god puppet didn't die. This was a big trouble. With her strength, it's fine to kill those mechanical puppets. But now, to give her such a huge blue battle god puppet, how could she resist? The blue battle god puppet slowly stood up and walked steadily towards Su Luo's position. The shadow in front of her eyes gradually enlarged and finally firmly covered Su Luo. The blue battle god puppet stood in front of Su Luo. His mouth sneered, and his eyes were full of ridicule. At this time, his whole body exuded a king's breath that controlled everything in front of him, as if Su Luo was as weak as a small ant. If he stepped his foot, he could crush Su Luo. This was what's on Su Luo's mind. Chapter 1803. The final level for the blue battle god puppet's lips raised a scornful sneer. Yours? He referred to the red battle god puppet. Su Luo knitted her brows, but slowly stood up. Her body was weak, but she still straightened up her posture. Her eyes calmly looked back. Yes. A simple word. The blue battle god puppet deliberately emitted a murderous aura. It took quite a while to be able to speak. You actually have some courage. The blue battle god puppet gave Su Luo a rare compliment. Su Luo looked at him with cold eyes. But the blue battle god puppet smiled gracefully. Looking at Su Luo, his eyes suddenly turned violet. The dignity of the battle god puppet clan are not allowed to be defiled. So Su Luo looked at him coldly. So, slit your own throat, the blue battle god puppet said it as if it should be by rights. Although Su Luo's face was still calm, her heart sank little by little, because she knew that the blue battle god puppet was serious. Although he laughed in a relaxed tone, the murderous eyes told her that he would never forgive her. The blue battle god puppet just looked at Su Luo with a laugh. Su Luo was still motionless, stayed on the spot. Su Luo, take a look at her current situation. All the cards had been used, and the most powerful red battle god puppet were down. There were not many spiritual things in Su Luo's hands. They were not enough to awaken the red battle god puppet. How could this be good? Su Luo's head began to hurt. Since you don't do it, then the blue battle god puppet grinned evilly. Then, with his arms stretched out, the next moment, Su Luo was already held by him like an eagle catching a chicken. Die! The blue battle god puppet roared. The slender fingers suddenly tightened. Cough! Cough! Su Luo felt that her throat was stuck dead, and a sense of suffocation came upon her nose. The shadow of death quickly enveloped her. Su Luo coughed continuously, but the fingers kept tightening, and tightening. How awful! Su Luo's face went from pale to purple and finally to red. She had an illusion that her body seemed to fly and her soul seemed to be out of her body. She didn't know how long. All of a sudden, a pleasant whistling sound rang in Su Luo's ear. This made the drowsy Su Luo woke up for a moment. In fact, Su Luo didn't know that if it wasn't for this sound, her soul would have been taken away. And the owner of this voice? Su Luo opened her eyes in confusion and looked at the scene in front of her. She didn't know when her body was thrown to the ground by the blue battle god puppet. Looking up from her point of view, there, a blue robe and a black robe were fighting fiercely. Su Luo sighed vaguely. Is this a dream? The sound that penetrated the eardrum just now seemed to be Nangong Luyun. Now this black-robed man seemed familiar, very familiar. But in the sky, those two great powers were so fast that it couldn't be captured with naked eyes. All Su Luo could see was black robe and blue robe. However, Su Luo firmly believed that the black robe was Nangong Luyun. At this time, the battle in midair had reached the most critical moment. It was clear that the black-robed man occupied a dominant position in this battle, and the blue-robed man step by step retreated in defeat, cutting an extremely sorry figure. Chapter 1804. Plum Blossom won finally. The black-robed man let out a big move. The white ball of light instantly concentrated on the blue-robed man's abdomen. The blue-robed man's body became stiff in a flash, powerless to evade and ruthlessly smashed into the ground, and time seemed to stagnate at this moment. Then, the white ball of light exploded in an instant, forming pink petals, beautiful and strange. Nangong Luyun was unaware when his shoulder was sat on by a little plum blossom. At this time, the plum blossom stuck out its adorable small tongue and glanced at the blue-robed man's disdainfully. Nangong Luyun pulled down the little plum blossom and put it into his space. However, it seemed that Nangong Luyun's space couldn't control the little plum blossom. Only to see it pried open the space, its small head popped out slightly, and it crawled out weakly little by little. Its two little claws tightly gripped Nangong Luyun's robe and not letting go. When the whole plant was about to crawl out, Nangong Luyun's broad palm pushed its head back, so the little plum blossom, which had been working hard for a long time, was pushed in again. While the two was playing this game, the blue battle god puppet's body has changed dramatically. One only saw pink flower petals entered into his body, making his whole body as rigid as iron. Then, the pink petals in his body unexpectedly condensed into a ball. From the beginning to the end, it got bigger and bigger. All of a sudden, there was only a loud explosion. In this moment, the body of the blue battle god puppet burst and turned into powder. What a terrible force! Su Luo looked up and stared at the little plum blossom flower leaning at the corner of Nangong Liyun's robe. This little plum blossom, with its little face raised, blinked its eyes and stared at Nangong Liyun. It seemed as if it would be able to maintain this action until the end of the world. Nangong Liyun's black robe was fluttering as if it was falling from the sky. Luo, Nangong Liyun was half kneeling on the ground, and his slender arm hugged Su Luo tightly. For a moment, the gentle pampering in his beautiful eyes was like a spring in the heaven, which made people involuntarily indulge in it and difficult to extricate themselves. "You're here, lying in his arms." Su Luo burst into the most gorgeous smile. Their eyes met, the eyes flashed, as if the entire world remained silent. Suddenly, Nangong Liyun folded his arms and just pressed Su Luo's delicate and soft body into his arms. The strength almost crushed Su Luo. Su Luo's pair of jade-like arms wrapped around Nangong Liyun's white neck. Her little face was buried in his chest, greedily breathing the male scent that belonged to her alone. Although they did not separate for a long time, the road was full of dangers, repeatedly got into difficulties, repeatedly passed by, which gave them a feeling of being separated from each other a lifetime ago. In this silent tenderness, their lips gradually getting closer and closer. At the most critical moment, cough, cough. A clear cough sounded in the quiet air. The warm atmosphere was suddenly interrupted, and Su Luo immediately opened her eyes. At this time, the little plum blossom was standing between her and Nangong, and this plum blossom was even glared at her. With a woman's unique intuition, Su Luo could clearly feel the hostility emanating from this little plum blossom. Moreover, its hostility was so obvious that it was not concealed at all. Step! Step! The little plum blossom quickly climbed to Nangong Liyun's shoulder. Chapter 1805. Plum Blossom 2. The thin branches turned into soft threads, wrapping around Nangong Liyun's neck, seemingly imitating the posture of Su Luo holding Nangong Liyun just now, firmly dominating Nangong Liyun. Su Luo's heart subconsciously became unhappy. However, her temper was usually reserved, didn't show her feeling. On the contrary, a faint smile appeared on her face, pointing at the plum blossom tree. "This is..." Nangong Liyun dragged the plum blossom down in a crude manner and without pity. "It's for you, do you like it?" Nangong Liyun squeezed the plum blossom into a ball and stuffed it to Su Luo. "It's not pleasant to see, but fortunately the strength is good, the speed is fast, and it's barely qualified to protect you, seeing that Nangong Liyun wanted to send it away. And it's for the woman on the opposite side." Little Plum Blossom suddenly showed a crying expression, shaking the branches and clinging to Nangong Liyun's wrist to prevent him from letting go. "Do you want to give it to me?" Su Luo looked at the little plum blossom with a smile on her face. "Ah!" Little Plum Blossom makes a fierce and penetrating cry to Su Luo, which looked somewhat malevolent. Su Luo showed her hands to Nangong Liyun. "Are you sure it will protect me at a critical time?" Su Luo felt that during the time of her life and death, it would be pretty good if the little plum blossom didn't throw stones when ones fell down a well. Nangong Liyun frowned slightly. If it wasn't for the idea of giving it to Su Luo, he wouldn't have kept the little plum blossom by his side in the first place. But Su Luo's concerns were not unreasonable. This plum blossom was indeed full of hostility towards Su Luo. "It's a pity." Nangong Liyun looked at the little plum blossom. At this time, the little plum blossom was obviously afraid of its own ending, only to see it slipped into Nangong Liyun's space and lost its trace in a flash. Looking at the empty palms, Nangong Liyun was helpless. After a while, he said to Su Luo, I will give it to you after training it. Let's talk about it later. Su Luo faintly smiled. In her opinion, this plum blossom was the most powerful of all the spiritual plants she had seen. Could it be easily trained? Su Luo was skeptical. Without the interference of little plum blossom, the two people sat together, snuggle and confide with each other. By the way, where did you find this little plum blossom? It's quite malevolent. Su Luo was still wary of this little plum blossom. It's because of a woman's sixth sense intuition. Mei's central palace. Nangong Lian was obviously reluctant to mention the plum blossom that made him unhappy. Have you been to the Mei central palace? I've been there too. Why didn't I meet you? Su Luo's eyes flickered at once. Then, when the words of the two people were in contrast, they were all dumbfounded. Su Luo thought of the little sable in her space, touching her forehead, speechless. If it wasn't for the little sable lost his consciousness because of her, she would definitely pulled it out and beat its butt. If it wasn't for it, she and Nangong Liyun would have met each other earlier. How could she have gone through all kinds of pursuit and killing by the battle god puppet? Nangong Liyun was also a little stunned. At that time, Su Luo was at his support distance, but he didn't know it all, and he just walked away. Luo. Fortunately, you're okay. Nangong Liyun held Su Luo tightly in his arms. If something happened to his Luo girl, how should he face himself? It's a good thing that we meet again. It seems that the heaven still cares for us. Su Luo was buried in Nangong Liyun's chest and greedily ingesting his masculine scent. Chapter 1806. Plum Blossom 3. We will never separate again in the future. Nangong Liyun's voice resonating. Would not be separated? Su Luo suddenly remembered that Nangong Liyun once said that he would leave. But in this warm moment, it was really not appropriate to say those things, or to appear to be feeling disappointed by the way. Su Luo suddenly remembered something and jumped from Nangong Liyun's arms. What's the matter? Nangong Liyun was caught off guard, which let Su Luo struggle free from his embrace. Hurry up! Let's go! Su Luo pulled Nangong Liyun up and rushed forward. She ran and said, the first fire in the beginning of heaven and earth's creation. The Yun Luo Red Lotus. Have you heard of it? Yun Luo Red Lotus? Nangong Liyun's eyes brightened instantly. Seeing that Nangong Liyun had heard of it, Su Luo didn't spend much time talking anymore. Her finger pointed to the front. Before it wakes up, let's go quickly. Time is running out. There was only 12 hours, but she wasted a lot of time when she crossed the Soul Bridge. Later, she was chased by the blue battle god puppet, and it took a lot of time. Now. How much time is left now? Su Luo asked Little Stone in her mind. Originally, there's still half an hour left, but you've wasted a quarter of an hour by kissing him. In other words, there's only a quarter of an hour now. Su Luo immediately widened her eyes. Why don't you remind me? Don't you think I should cut off the 5 senses automatically when the scene is not suitable for children? Little Stone arrogantly mocked Su Luo. Su Luo suddenly sullen, glaring at the little stone speechlessly. Soon after, she quickly stood up, pulling Nangong Liyun's hand, and quickly dashed forward. If I remember correctly, it should be in front. There's still time. While saying that, their speed soared to the pinnacle. Nangong Liyun smiled dotingly. You don't have to be so tired. You just need to point at the direction. Before the words were heard, Nangong Liyun's slender arm picked Su Luo up to princess carry her. Even when he held her, his speed didn't slow down at all. Your speed. Su Luo's eyes gradually brightened, and he grabbed Nangong Liyun's robe. Your strength has greatly increased, hasn't it? Are you Saint Rank now? Saint Rank? It's just a so. Nangong Liyun's tone was very annoyingly proud. When he first entered the roaming dragon's secret territory, he was already in the commander rank. Now the Saint Rank was also no better? Su Luo's face was dumbfounded. Compared with Nangong Liyun, her promotion speed was too slow. She was only in 10th rank now. Because Su Luo had a map in her hand, she wouldn't go astray. There were soul flames constantly blocking the road. Originally, These soul flames were very difficult for Su Luo to deal with. But now there's Nangong Luyun, and things became very simple. When confronted with the soul flames attack, Nangong Luyun only slightly waved his sleeves. All these soul flames retreated immediately, just like a subject respectfully worshipped a monarch. It's almost made Su Luo scared silly. This kind of way also worked. Su Luo's eyes almost popped out. Previously, how did these soul flames deal with her? Formed a bridge and tried every way to block her progress. How could it change into kneeling to welcome Nangong Luyun? That was too big of a difference, wasn't it? Comparing with the difference in treatment, Su Luo almost cried. Chapter 1807. Red Lotus came out one. What's the matter? Nangong Luyun asked casually. Nothing. Su Luo stared at him angrily. Nangong Luyun suddenly smiled and lovingly rubbed his family Luo girl's little head. The little girl's angry look was extremely cute. Come on, it's right ahead. Su Luo, who had been looking at the map, was pleasantly surprised and urging him. Nangong Luyun's footsteps accelerated, his slender arms holding Su Luo. A gust of wind swept forward. Soon they arrived at a magical place. Compared to the outside, this can be described as a fairyland. A sound of water came from a stream in front, revolved around in circle, dark blue, crystal clear, gleaming reflection in sunlight, giving a very dreamlike feeling. In the center of the stream, there was a white jade floating platform. There was a hint of aura on it which made people want to get close involuntarily. There it is. Su Luo looked at the floating platform. A pure white lotus flower was blooming quietly. She was very happy and almost jumped up excitedly. Nangong Luyun also naturally saw it. Wait here, don't move, let me pass. Nangong Luyun ordered Su Luo to stand in a safe place, and then he flew to it. On the floating platform, this quiet white lotus quivered slightly. Nangong Luyun's figure stood in front of the white lotus. However, he did not rush to act, but stood in place, his eyes half narrowed, and carefully looked at the white lotus. Is this really the Yun Luo red lotus that Su Luo wanted? But why isn't it not red? And Nangong Luyun released a spirit power, trying to probe inside the white lotus and get some secret information. However, just at this time, Little Stone reminded Su Luo, Yun Luo red lotus is about to wake up. Hurry up. Therefore, Su Luo passed this sentence to Nangong Luyun. Nangong Luyun's beautiful eyebrows were wrinkled imperceptibly. This white lotus was not the Yun Luo red lotus at all, because its scent was not pure enough. The shape could be changed, but the atmosphere formed by chaos in the creation heaven and earth would never be changed. There's still a cup of tea time if you can't find the Yun Luo red lotus. The little stone's voice was unprecedentedly imposing. Although he didn't finish the sentence, she was able to understand what he meant. If they couldn't find the Yun Luo red lotus at that time, when Red Lotus wakes up, they could all turn into a funerary object and vanished in the puff of smoke. Now there's only two ways for Su Luo. First, continue to find it. As for whether it could be found in a cup of tea time, it was difficult to predict. The second was to quickly retreat from now. Only in this way, they could reach a safe area at the last moment. Walk or stay. Su Luo clenched her teeth, her eyes staring at the Nangong Luyun. This decision was not easy for her, so she left the matter to Nangong Luyun. Nangong Luyun's eyes were like electricity, scanning everything around him carefully and receiving Su Luo's questions. He smiled and spoke with a gentle voice. He looked at Su Luo seriously. Do you trust me? A simple 4 words, but there is an endless surging self-confidence. I trust you, Su Luo smiled and nodded. Nangong Luyun would not have risked himself if he didn't at least 80% sure. He wouldn't take risks. Good. Nangong Luyun's eyes showed a light smile, pulling Su Luo forward slowly, and his slender fingers pointed to the water surface in the east. If I'm not mistaken, it should be there. Chapter 1808. Red Lotus came out too. The voice hadn't even heard yet, but Nangong Liuyun's palm had already condensed a wind blade, blasting toward the bottom of the stream. The wind blade hit the water. The water surged. Suddenly, a small lotus emerged slowly. The red lotus flower, a small one, not much bigger than a fist. But when Su Luo looked at it, she believed that this was the Yun Luo red lotus she was looking for. Because although the red lotus was tightly closed, it gave people a very pure feeling, as if looking at it was a blasphemy. Yes, this is it. There is no mistake. Su Luo was thrilled. At this moment, the red lotus suddenly swayed, and then the outer layer of petals opened quietly. Yun Luo red lotus is going to bloom. Su Luo was stirred up. If the Yun Luo red lotus completely bloomed, then it would be disastrous for them. Su Luo would never allow this to happen. Su Luo was fast, but Nangong Liyun was faster than her. Only his black robe that could be seen moving. His figure had already disappeared, and in a blink of an eye, he was only a foot away from the Yun Luo red lotus. But when Nangong Liyun's hand touched the Yun Luo red lotus, his wrist slightly trembled. Nangong Liyun immediately turned back to Su Luo. His hand was empty. You can't take it? Su Luo asked incredulously. Don't tell me that even Nangong Liyun couldn't do it? No. Nangong Liyun slowly shook his head and pushed Su Luo. He said, You go take it. Could it be? Su Luo was exceptionally intelligent. In a flash of light, she could thought of the possibility. Could it be that whoever took it, they will be recognized as its masters? You're right. Nangong Liyun dotingly touched Su Luo's nose and spoke softly. Hurry. Time is running out. Su Luo smiled and nodded. Okay. Wait for me for a while. However, when Su Luo turned around and was about to go over, a misfortune suddenly happened. It was only 100 meters away. Outside the cave, a pair of sinister eyes stared at the scene. The first fire in the beginning of heaven and earth's creation. Yun Luo, red lotus? There's such a precious hidden fire here. Dongfang Xian greedily looked at the fire, and his eyes were filled with envy and malice. He hated these two people in front of him. Would he watch the Yun Luo red lotus be taken away by Su Luo? Even if it killed him, he would never allow this to happen. Dongfang Xian's 5 features were twisted and sinister. The veins on the back of his hand were bulged, showing his inner excitement and anger. All of a sudden, a snow-white dagger crossed his right wrist. The blood rushed out, trickling down and soaking the ground. But there was no expression of pain on Dongfang Xian's face. On the contrary, he looked unusually peaceful, and even with a touch of pleasure. His eyes were fixed on Su Luo, and he muttered some sentences. With my blood, exchange with devil's soul. 10 years to change. Dongfang Xian's voice was very faint. If you didn't pay attention, no one would notice that he was talking. At first, it didn't work, but as blood flowed more, Dongfang Xian's face became paler and paler, and the aura around him actually started to change. Chapter 1809. Red Lotus came out 3 countless of blood, condensed into a thick blood mist, and gradually diffused throughout the whole space. Dongfang Xian, with bloodstains, walked towards Nangong Liyun and Su Luo step by step. When Su Luo turned around to pick up the Yun Luo red lotus, she suddenly found that her body could not move. First from the feet, then slowly extended upwards, then the whole body seemed to be frozen and completely unable to move. Su Luo looked at Dongfang Xian in disbelief. What's going on? What did Dongfang Xian do? At this time, Nangong Liyun's expression was very ugly. Originally, with his strength, Dongfang Xian would suffer a crushing defeat under his hands. But now he suddenly made these moves, leaving him in a passive state. Yes, he was also unable to avoid it, and his footsteps were locked in place. Dongfang Xian's eyes were like a viper, staring at Nangong Liyun. But at this time, he wanted to kill Nangong Liyun and Su Luo, which was far from possible. Although he sold his soul and blood to the devil, He also could kill himself while he was reciting the incantation. Ugh! Dongfang Xian suddenly vomited blood. His face was already very pale. Now, after spitting blood like this, he looked even more pale. At this time, Su Luo's face was a little anxious. The Yun Luo red lotus was within reach, but she couldn't get it at all. It was fine if it was just like this, but now was the most critical moment for the Yun Luo red lotus to wake up. Su Luo looked helplessly at the Yun Luo red lotus that once again happily opened a layer of petals. Now, the Yun Luo red lotus had only one layer of petals left. When it fully bloomed, that was the time when everyone died. Su Luo had to remind Dongfang Xian, "Aren't you afraid of death?" Death! Dongfang Xian suddenly burst into violent laughter. "Ah ha ha! It's not bad to die with you." Su Luo gritted his teeth and stared at him helplessly. "What the hell did you do? How could we suddenly unable to move?" Su Luo tried to disturb him. Dongfang Xian sneered coldly, but did not respond. Blood sacrifice was to sacrifice one's soul and blood to the devil. More frankly, it was to exchange one's own life with the devil. The devil gave him strength, but the devil also continuously devoured and reduced his life. As the time passed, Dongfang Xian's lifespan already did not have much left, so he did not waver. "The Yun Luo red lotus is mine." Dongfang Xian moved quickly towards the Yun Luo red lotus's location, to take it forcefully. Just like the saying, the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Su Luo worked hard to finally find it, but now would it really fell into Dongfang Xian's hand? God, what an injustice! Su Luo's face was white with anger. She wished she could tear Dongfang Xian into pieces. When Dongfang Xian's hand touched the Yun Luo red lotus, a cyclone suddenly blew towards him. This was the protection mechanism of the Yun Luo red lotus itself. But once Dongfang Xian was bitten by a snake, 10 years he was in fear of a well rope. Seeing the cyclone blew, he had no time to think about it, so his body subconsciously avoided it. At this time, he was too weak to bear the heavy burden of the cyclone. After returning to the original place, Dongfang Xian glared indignantly at the Yun Luo red lotus. Chapter 18:10. Red Lotus came out for what a snob. Dongfang Xian cursed, then his body retreated quickly, and then turned around and ran, because he felt the Yun Luo red lotus was condensing an extremely awful breath. This breath was powerful enough to destroy the heaven and earth. Dongfang Xian's body was as fast as lightning, flying away. Only Su Luo and Nangong Luyun were pitiful. Their bodies couldn't move at all. They don't even have the strength to lift a finger. They could only watch the fleeing figure of Dongfang Xian. At this time, the last petal of the Yun Luo red lotus slowly bloomed. There was a blood mist all around. An extremely hot temperature approached in the blink of an eye. Huge blood-red lava burst from under the stream. Then it toppled the mountains and overturned the seas. Then a dazzling and enchanting light exploded in a flash of lightning. Subsequently, a blood-red pillar of fire with a length of several tens of meters burst out from below, with the power of a volcanic eruption, and the surrounding aura was instantly in chaos, surging with violent and appalling energy fluctuations, and this blood-red pillar of fire was surging towards him and Su Luo with a threatening momentum. For the first time, a faint crack appeared in Nangong Luyun's calm face. If they did not do anything, within a few seconds, he and Su Luo, who had no strength to resist, would be turned into dregs by lava. Nangong Luyun had no time to think about it. For a moment, a pink blood mist appeared on his body. It was obvious that he made a deal with the little plum blossom. Later, there's only a bang sound, and Nangong Luyun spit blood, but he also broke away from the imprisonment set by Dongfang Xian. In the next moment, his body quickly flew towards Su Luo without hesitation to protect her. However, because he broke away from the confinement set by Dongfang Xian, he had already suffered serious internal injuries. Now he could only protect Su Luo, but he couldn't resist the fiery lava. In Su Luo's horrified eyes, the fiery lava surged and swallowed them instantly. The world was silent. Looking at the boundless sea of fire around her, Su Luo's mouth raised a bitter smile. Who would have thought that at this last critical moment, there would be such an accident as Dongfang Xian? What's more, Dongfang Xian still had a trump card, which could entirely confine Nangong Luoyun. Although Su Luo didn't know yet, because of the use of this card, even if Dongfang Xian escaped now, he only had 10 years of life. The moment when Su Luo closed her eyes, a loving voice suddenly came to her ear. "Little girl, live well." This voice was so familiar that seemed to frequently ring in her ear. But what did it mean? How could it sound like a last word? Su Luo had countless questions in her heart. She wanted to hold him, keep him, but her eyes couldn't open. She couldn't even move a finger. Time went by. The pain on Su Luo's body recovered little by little. It hurts, a kind of pain that penetrated deep into the bone marrow and awakened Su Luo. Slowly opened her misty eyes, Su Luo looked at the surrounding scene weakly. The eyes were red, with countless fiery red lava above her head, surrounded by pillars of fire, and she was now lying on a lotus petal. Chapter 18:11. Red Lotus came out 5 on the side. Su Luo could see Nangong Luoyun at a glance. At this moment, he closed his eyes. His eyelashes were as thin as cicada wings, and his thick eyebrows were tightly wrinkled, which seemed to have something difficult to understand. Su Luo's eyes looked down, and her face turned red in an instant, because she found that at this time, Nangong Luoyun unexpectedly did not have a strand of thread. The skin was as pure as a baby. It may be assumed that it was because of the burst of lava the cloth couldn't withstand, and it turned into ashes. Nangong Luoyun's silk clothes couldn't bear it. So in that case, Su Luo subconsciously looked down. Next moment, her complexion became even more red. Her clothes returned to ashes. There was not much time to think about it. Su Luo quickly took out clean clothes from her space. After taking a good care of herself, Su Luo took out the men's clothes to help Nangong Luoyun dress properly. Fortunately, there's always men's clothes in her space, which was convenient at this time. Nangong Luoyun still did not wake up. "Little Stone, what's going on?" Su Luo sat cross-legged, waiting for Nangong Luoyun to wake up while throwing questions to Little Stone. She remembered that the lava was soaring like a tidal wave. However, now she was actually still alive. There must be something fishy about it. But Su Luo waited for a long time, but there's still no answer. "Little Stone?" Su Luo called again in a low voice. Still no response. What's going on? Su Luo suddenly had a bad feeling. Her soul quickly drifted into the space, searching for traces of Little Stone everywhere. There was no trace of him at the side of the spring where Little Stone liked to stay. On the peak of the mountain with the highest view, there was still no trace of him. There was still no trace of him under the Varian acacia tree with the densest spirit. Where the hell did Little Stone go? Su Luo's bad premonition grew stronger and stronger. Suddenly, a weak smile and familiar words appeared in her mind. He said, "Little girl, live well." At that time, Su Luo was unconscious. She thought it was a dream and didn't take him seriously. But now, Su Luo anxiously looking for that piece of red little stone. But the little stone was gone. It was like disappearing out of thin air. Su Luo was so anxious. She was running around in circles, releasing her spirit power and searching everywhere inside and out in her space for 7 or 8 times. But the little stone seemed to vanish into thin air. There was not one bit of a trace. In the end, what's going on? Su Luo left the space dispirited. The soul returned to the reality. However, the worry about Little Stone grew more and more. Maybe Nangong Luoyun knew something. Thinking about this, Su Luo began to push Nangong Luoyun. "Wake up! Quickly wake up!" With Su Luo call, the dense curly lashes of Nangong Luoyun fluttered slightly and slowly opened the slightly misty eyes. Cough, cough. As soon as he opened his eyes, Nangong Luoyun burst into a violent cough. Su Luo suddenly felt distressed. She quickly helped him up, patted him gently on the back, and asked with concern and anxiousness, "What's wrong? Did you get hurt again? Is it serious?" "Very serious." Nangong Luoyun took advantage of the situation, leaned on Su Luo's slender shoulder, greedily inhaled her unique fragrance, and said weakly, "It's painful, really painful." Su Luo lovingly caressed his white jade-like face, bit her lower lip, and apologized ruefully. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have woke you up." Chapter 1812. Red Lotus came out 6, so you are responsible. Nangong Luoyun took her hand, encircled it around his waist, and grunted slowly. After hearing this, Su Luo suddenly did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Okay, I'll take responsibility. Is it possible not to be responsible? But first tell me, where's Little Stone?" Nangong Luoyun knew the existence of Little Stone, and Su Luo remembered that when she was unconscious, Nangong Luoyun was still awake. He must have known what happened. "Little Stone?" There was a light flashed in Nangong Luoyun's eyes. Seeing him stop talking, Su Luo was anxious. "Come on, tell me already. Don't cover up the truth." Nangong Luoyun looked at Su Luo solemnly, with an unprecedented dignified look. He asked, "Are you sure you want to know the truth?" "Amen." Su Luo nodded without hesitation. "Even if the truth is cruel?" Nangong Luoyun confirmed again. "Amen." Su Luo noted firmly again. Even in the face of the first fire in the creation of heaven and earth, with her understanding of Little Stone, he would never betray himself. On the contrary, what Su Luo was most worried about was that Little Stone had an accident in order to save her. No wonder that Little Stone was willing to sacrifice for you. Nangong Luoyun's slender and jade-like fingers gently rubbed Su Luo's white cheek, sighed softly. "The Little Stone had disappeared and will never appear again. You don't be too sad." "Sacrifice for me? You mean Little Stone?" Su Luo's eyes turned red instantly, and she stared at Nangong Luoyun in disbelief. Her fingers tightly grasped his clothes, and the veins on the back of her hands was bulging. You didn't mean that, do you?" "No, it's what you think." Although Nangong Luoyun couldn't bear it, he knows that better to just get the pain over with, rather than prolong the agony. So he quickly told Su Luo the truth of the matter. "It's an honor to die for you." "Do you really think so?" Su Luo stared at him angrily. What was the honor of Little Stone to die for her? How could she make Little Stone have this honor? "Well, if I can die for you, it is also my honor." Nangong Luoyun took Su Luo's little head into his arms and recalled the previous details with a sigh in his voice. "At that time, I was seriously injured. I could protect myself, but couldn't protect you. If I protect you, I would die." Su Luo's eyes widened instantly. Exactly how serious was the situation? Yes, it was so serious. Under such circumstances, Nangong Luoyun gently stroked Su Luo's satin-like soft black hair with his fingers and said slowly, word by word, "There was no way at the time. Just when I made my choice, Little Stone appeared." The fiery red lava was reflected in the Nangong Luoyun's deep and beautiful eyes, with a trace of enchanting and devilish beauty. Nangong Luoyun paused, and then slowly told this life and death matter. Little Stone figure appeared. He turned into an armor of nothingness, protected you and me, but the power of the Yun Luo Red Lotus explosion was too powerful. Even if he exhausted his spirit power, he could only protected us for a few seconds. So, in the end, he used the way of burning his soul. Nangong Luoyun said with a sigh. As we all know, the power of burning the soul was very powerful, but once the soul was burned, it would really disappear from this world and turned into nothingness. Chapter 1813. 1 Year, 1 No. Su Luo's tears fell down. Tears rolled down her cheeks, fell onto the lotus petal, and splashing a little water. Little Stone, was he really gone? She didn't believe it. But if that was not the case, where would he go? Su Luo searched inside and out, but there was no trace of him everywhere. Nangong Luyun cradled her in his arms and gently caressed her soft back and softly consoled her. Restrain your grief. Carry on with your life? I don't believe it. Su Luo was stirred up. She pulled Nangong Luyun's sleeve. Her lips was trembling slightly with emotion, and she said repeatedly, How can it be? I will soon be promoted to commander rank. That time I can help him rebuild his body. He can appear justly and honorably. Why is this happening? Nangong Luyun did not know how to comfort her. He just kept patting her back and comforting her. Su Luo's heart was bitter. Little Stone disappeared like this. She didn't even have time to say last words to him. Although he was arrogant and had a poisonous tongue, he had helped her so much along the way, just like her closest comrade, who was also a teacher and a friend. Su Luo was completely immersed in sadness. 2 tears flowed silently and dropped to the lotus petal under her. Tick, tick. Suddenly, Su Luo found that the lotus petals at her feet were shaking. Although slight, she and Nangong Luyun felt it at the same time. Go and find the Yun Luo red lotus. Nangong Luyun threw this task to her in order to make Su Luo stop her sadness. The little stone rescued you regardless of his life, just to let you conquer the Yun Luo red lotus. Don't tell me you won't let little stone's last wish come true? Okay, I'll look for it. Su Luo wiped away the tears in her eyes. Only then, Su Luo measured up everything in her surrounding. As far as the eye can see, all surrounded by a sea of fire. Countless of fires scattered everywhere. There was a surging lava beneath, with an unbearable heat. In the center of the lava was a red and enchanting lotus. The lotus was very large, and the small petal was the size of a double bed. Su Luo and Nangong Luyun slept on this petal before. Yun Luo, red lotus? Su Luo pointed her finger to the huge lotus. At this time, the Yun Luo red lotus seemed to fell into a deep sleep, not as powerful as before, like the devil's nature that devour everything. Su Luo wanted to approach it, but found out that she couldn't get into the range of the lotus core. Su Luo shook her head at Nangong Luyun helplessly. Nangong Luyun beckoned to Su Luo. Now your strength has not been restored. It is inevitable that you are unable to subdue it. Come here. Su Luo silently walked towards Nangong Luyun. Nangong Luyun's snow-white fingers were placed on her veins. His deep eyes were looking at Su Luo for a moment, and his thick eyebrows were slightly wrinkled. Only 20% of your strength remained, in fact. Nangong Luyun himself also had no strength, not even the strength to stand. Under such circumstances, let alone subdue Yun Luo Red Lotus, they had better expect that the Yun Luo Red Lotus would not suddenly burst out and devour them instead. Su Luo and Nangong Luyun seized the time to cultivate. But the situation outside had changed dramatically. Dongfang Xian retreated very quickly, and the moment when he pulled out, a big explosion happened in the place of the Yun Luo Red Lotus. Chapter 1814. 1 year 2 before the outbreak. Because Little Stone fought with his life at the last moment, the half-awakened Yun Luo Red Lotus was severely impacted, to the extent that now it was in a semi-disabled state, fell into a coma, and had no ability to attack. At this time, it was also the best time to subdue it. Unfortunately, Su Luo and Nangong Luyun were both like a clay bodhisattva fording a river, unable to save themselves, let alone others. Time goes by. Su Luo's cultivation was gradually recovering, but Nangong Luyun's situation was not very good. Previously, in order to save Su Luo, he threw himself to block all of the attacks with his body, so the injury was much more serious than what Su Luo saw, and he didn't know how long it would take to recover. But Su Luo looked at Yun Luo Red Lotus, and then looked at the quiet Nangong Luyun's back. The anxiety in her eyes became more and more intense. Su Luo remembered that Master once said that the gate of Roaming Dragon's secret territory was only open for 3 months. Once 3 months were up, if you couldn't go out, you could only be locked in forever. But now, even if Su Luo gave up the Yun Luo Red Lotus, she couldn't get out. because she had looked around. It was a fiery red world. There were crimson flame in all directions, surrounded by scalding hot lava surging like a tidal wave. Through the lava, there was a snow-white wall. They did not know what material it was made of, but it was not something that she and the injured Nangong Luyun could break. Therefore, now they were like being put in an egg with no door on all sides. Su Luo suddenly felt helpless. How could this be good? Hee. A strange voice came to Su Luo's ear, which almost scared her. Who? Su Luo looked around warily, but there was nothing unusual. Want to go out? This sound seemed to come from a distant space-time, but it also seemed to be close. Su Luo's body turned around in an instant, staring coldly at the Yun Luo red lotus, earnestly and cautiously. It was you? Amen. The master of this voice spoke very proudly, just like Little Stone. Su Luo's heart sank suddenly after she realized something. The Yun Luo red lotus could talk to her. Does it mean that it has fully awakened? Then, how to deal with it? What did you do with Little Stone? Is he still alive? Su Luo's eyes were fixed on the blooming Yun Luo red lotus, and with hope in her heart. But what the lotus said made Su Luo's heart sink to the bottom of the valley. Little Stone? The ball of fire? It seemed to be at a loss, and it seemed to have a little impression after slowly recalling it. Oh, the taste of that ball of fire was quite good. You! Su Luo's veins on her forehead was bulging. She wished she could tear the Yun Luo red lotus into pieces. Hateful. You are hateful. The Yun Luo red lotus was not very smart, but it could still understand other scolding, so it became unhappy, and it proudly snorted. If this young master didn't have the memory of that ball of fire in my mind, I will blow you all into dregs. Humph. Su Luo caught a hint of information from this sentence. She instantly stared with her big eyes and asked affirmatively, You mean Little Stone lives in your mind? Tell me if it's true. Chapter 1815. 1 Year 3. This problem was somewhat abstruse. After just waking up from a deep sleep, Little Red Lotus scratched his head. After struggling for a while, he could barely understood. Anyway, he had become a little memory of this young master. Oh, you were so troublesome. Su Luo, who was accused of being troublesome, didn't know what to do or how to react. In fact, if you didn't stare at this lotus flower, its haughty expression was a little bit like a little stone. Could it be said that after being swallowed by the Yun Luo red lotus, the little stone really became a part of Yun Luo red lotus's body? That is to say, in fact, Little Stone still exists? Just when Su Luo was shocked, pleased, and puzzled, the bright lotus petal of Little Red Lotus reached out and touched Su Luo's calf. Hey, do you want to go out? The little lotus's manner of speaking was aloof and insufferably arrogant. Of course, do you have a way? Su Luo snorted unhappily. Originally, she wanted to contract the Yun Luo red lotus before it woke up, but now this little thing had woken up on its own and looked so proud. It would be difficult to contract, but Little Stone became a part of its body. How could Su Luo be reconciled if she did not contract it? One only saw the Yun Luo red lotus raise its hand. Suddenly, numerous lotus petals were falling continuously. However, these lotus petals were fixed in the mid-air in a strange and uncanny manner, not falling to the ground as Su Luo expected. Fuse 64 into 32, and you can get out. The Yun Luo red lotus snorted coldly. Then, the huge red lotus closed itself up, like a small, crouched animal, and seemed to be too lazy to pay attention to Su Luo. Of course, it didn't tell Su Luo what was the biggest surprise after her success. In fact, it didn't really want Su Luo to succeed, but it was restricted to the rules and the inexplicable closeness to Su Luo in its mind, so it still told her the method. But after, he was somewhat regretted it, so it closed itself up and curled up in depression, so what the eye didn't see, the heart didn't grieve over. Naturally, Su Luo didn't know the twists and turns in the little brat's mind, so it felt strange to see that it actually shrank back. When she reacted and wanted to ask again, she couldn't wake the little brat up. These lotus petals were arranged like a platoon of soldiers. At first glance, there seemed to be no rule to speak of, but if you think about it carefully, you would find that there was an endless mystery in them. Helpless, Su Luo could only focus on these strange red lotus petals in midair. Su Luo turned to look at Nangong Liyun. At this time, Nangong Liyun's handsome face was pale and bloodless, his eyes closed tightly, and he fell into a deep meditation. Don't bother him anymore. Su Luo thought so, then sat on the ground with one hand on her chin, frowned and stared at the petals. From 64 lotus petals to 32? What should I do? No clue at all. The little brat was really slipping away without giving a little hint. Su Luo groaned in her heart, and her brain was spinning. After thinking about it for a long time, still fruitless and had no idea. So, Su Luo stood up suddenly. She thought angrily, since she hadn't thought of a way to fuse them. Would it be possible to add them up one by one? Chapter 1816, Problem Solving 1. She thought so, and naturally would do so. But what happened to Su Luo was unexpected. She did not know what method was used by the little red lotus, but it was still motionless. Su Luo just wanted to jump up, but when she was halfway there, something was wrong because she found that there seemed to be a magical power around her, which could prohibit her. It was like a spider web that could trap people. In other words, when Su Luo jumped up, as long as she was not careful, her body would be frozen in that space, and she could never get down again. After realizing the truth, Su Luo's heart was suddenly shocked. In midair, Su Luo hurriedly turned around and then fell to the ground after rotating in midair. After falling to the ground, Su Luo patted her chest with lingering fear. Fortunately, she discovered it early, otherwise she would be frozen. Once frozen, the consequences would be unimaginable. After sighing, Su Luo's distress increased. Because now she couldn't even get on. What could she do to fuse the 62 petals into 32 according to the Yun Luo Red Lotus? It was a task that couldn't be accomplished at all. Su Luo really felt more and more distressed and desperate, and kept sighing. If it couldn't be done, she and Nangong Liyun would probably stay here forever, never thought about going out. Because Su Luo never doubted the truth of what the Red Lotus said. And more than half of the 3 months had passed, and the rest of the time was less than 1 month. Could she really came up with a solution in this month? If it was after this month, even if they figured out a way, they would never got out. Su Luo grabbed her hair anxiously, then turned to see Nangong Liyun. At this time, Nangong Liyun was still immersed in his cultivation. His face was serious and solemn. Su Luo had no choice but to look at the problems in the mid-air and studied them carefully. Su Luo had no clue here. Looking back at Dongfang Xian, his luck seemed to be very good. After Dongfang Xian's blood sacrifice, he knew he couldn't get the Yun Luo Red Lotus, so he immediately turned around and ran away. His choice turned out to be right. It was not long after he ran away. Suddenly, there was a rumbling sound behind him. When he looked back, behind him was a soaring lava, and pillars of fire rose up high in the air like an angry dragon. At that time, Dongfang Xian was surprised, pleased, and horrified at the same time. He was surprised that his choice to retreat on the spot was the best choice. He was pleased when Yun Luo Red Lotus burst out. Nangong Liyun and Su Luo were imprisoned by his blood sacrifice. To his horror, he had no idea that the energy of the Yun Luo Red Lotus would be so huge. He was afraid that he would be affected. Dongfang Xian didn't want to think about it much. He used the fastest speed in his life and ran forward frantically. At that time, if he used this speed to pursue and kill Su Luo, Su Luo would have been dead. It could be seen that at the critical moment of life and death, a person's potential would be much greater. Even though Dongfang Xian was weak due to blood sacrifice, his instinct of survival triggered all his potential. His speed was very fast as lightning. The lava attack of the Yun Luo Red Lotus could not be underestimated. So, in the end, even if Dongfang Xian ran very fast, he couldn't escape its attack range. Chapter 1817. Problem Solving 2. Listening to the loud noise, Dongfang Xian looked back in horror. What he saw was the surging fiery lava, and the next moment, Dongfang Xian's body was completely drowned in lava. Time had passed for a long time. The lava had already washed away. Dongfang Xian, who was buried underneath, slowly opened his eyes and struggled to support his weak body. "I'm not dead. Huh? God really help me." Dongfang Xian laughed like a lunatic. Knowing that he was safe, Dongfang Xian's first reaction was to confirm Nangong Luyun and Su Luo's news, although he had already regarded them as dead people subconsciously. After all, the situation at that time, Nangong Luyun and Su Luo were imprisoned without any resistance, and then they were close to the Yun Luo Red Lotus. When all of these conditions were added together, if they could not kill those two people, Dongfang Xian felt that he didn't want to live anymore. Dongfang Xian limped over again. Sure enough, the original flame cave had completely disappeared now. There was only a deep pit on the ground, proving that there was the fires of Yun Luo Red Lotus here. As for Nangong Luyun and Su Luo's body, it must have been blown to pieces by the explosion of Yun Luo Red Lotus. There was absolutely no possibility of survival. All of a sudden, Dongfang Xian felt a huge pressure of fire enveloping him, and his heartbeat suddenly accelerated. Yun Luo Red Lotus. Must be Yun Luo Red Lotus. Yun Luo Red Lotus. After waking up, Dongfang Xian was extremely afraid of the Yun Luo Red Lotus. At this time, how could he dare to grab this fire? What's more, he was in such a poor condition now. Dongfang Xian didn't have much time to think about it before turning around and running away. The Yun Luo did not seem to deliberately making things difficult, and after he ran out of the attack range, it did not pursue. Dongfang Xian reached out to wipe off the cold sweat on his forehead. He was very grateful. At the same time, he began to feel panic. When he first came in, Grandmaster Rong Yun said that he could only stay in it for 3 months. He didn't know how long he was unconscious. He didn't know if the time had passed. Thinking of this possibility, how could Dongfang Xian sit still? At that time, his tattered body began to rush forward again, running all the way to the Great Valley. Great Valley, the end of Roaming Dragon's secret territory. When Dongfang Xian reached the Great Valley, his eyes were slightly squinted. Because he saw two people, more accurately, these two people were his enemies. Beichen Ying and Zian. Dongfang Xian? Beichen Ying sensed his breath, immediately turned his head, and there was joy in his face. Who would it be if it wasn't me? Dongfang Xian arrogantly raised the corner of his lips. Although he was weak now, but it's not necessarily unable to beat these two people, so Dongfang Xian's heart was at ease. Did you see third senior brother? And Su Luo. Ziyan rushed up and asked excitedly. The two of them? Haha, all the information was in Dongfang Xian. What do you mean? Bei Chening felt that Dongfang Xian's attitude was strange. He immediately pushed him forward. When we were separated, you chased to kill Luo. Speak. What did you do to her? Dongfang Xian, tell me the truth. Ziyan's sword had been sheathed. At this time, her face was grim, serious, and cold. Chapter 1818, Problem Solving 3, Do you really want to know? Dongfang Xian sneered carelessly, looking at them with a smile, yet not a smile, seemingly did not take their threats to the heart. Say it. Ziyan's long sword pointed to Dongfang Xian. Since you want to know so much, why don't you go down with them? Ha 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 ha. Dongfang Xian thought of Su Luo and Nangong Luyun who had been killed. He immediately laughed to his heart's content, until tears coming out. It was really great to get revenge. At this time, Bei Qining and Ziyan's complexion were already ashen. Ziyan said nothing and went straight up with her sword. Dongfang Xian took advantage of the situation to dodge and coldly sneered. Time is up. I have no time to play with you. At this time, the Huanjing's gate of the Great Valley in the front was slowly opened. Dongfang Xian flashed by and then flew out. Today was the 3rd month. Dongfang Xian had no time or physical strength to spend with them. Looking at the open gate, Ziyin and Bei Qining were both dumbfounded. Then they looked at each other and didn't know what they should do. Was it to follow Dongfang Xian to go out, or to stay in place and wait for Su Luo and Nangong Luyan? What to do? Ziyan's tone was a little anxious. Bei Qingying's handsome face was cold. His red lips pursed into a white line. Looking at Dongfang Xian's disappearing figure, his eyes were murderous. We can't leave until second brother and Luo have come out. Bei Qinying's voice was cold, with a little anxiety and worry in his eyes, and he walked around in the same place. This door was only open for one day. If today was past, but Nangong Luyun and Su Luo had not come yet, then it would be a big problem. Let's start looking. Come back here before dark. Bei Qining stared at Ziyin with firm eyes. Okay, but we must make a mark first so as not to miss each other. Ziyan's face taut, and her heart was very uneasy. After looking at each other, they rushed away in opposite directions. The night began to fall. Seeing that the closing time was approaching, in the darkness, the two figures approached from a distance and finally met at the gate. Bei Qi's face was gloomy, with a trace of sorrow. I don't have any news here, do you? Ziyin was anxious. What to do? I found no news at all along the way, and I did not know where they are. Can it really be like Dongfang Xian said? Don't talk nonsense. Second brother is much stronger than Dongfang Xian. Even Dongfang Xian could run out. Could something happen to him? Bei Qinying's face fell. His face looked cold like frost. I don't know what happened to Luo. Ziyin stomped her foot anxiously. Then the two of them looked at the open gate and did not know what to do for a while. I don't want to lose them. Anyway, I won't go out. You get out. Ziyin turned her body and sat on the ground. She stared at the door in a daze. Her eyes were gradually getting wet. Bei Qining sat quietly beside her, holding her head in pain. Her voice was hoarse and gloomy. After a long time, he murmured, Do you think I would go out? Four of them came in together. Could it be there's only two of them when they go out? In front, the white light was flickering, and the Huanjing's gate faintly swayed. The gate is closing. Ziyin was anxious and stood up suddenly. Chapter 1819, Problem-Solving for Bei Qining, was also anxious. Can't let it be shut off. If it's shut off, you could never open it again. They could go out at any time now, but what about Nangong? Luo? What if they're both struggling to get here? No, we can't let the Huanjing's gate be closed like this. Bei Qining and Ziyin rushed up. Two people, one left and one right, holding on to the slowly closing gate. Both of them didn't know what's going on. When they put their spirit power into their hands and passed it through their palms, the gate actually stopped moving. But when Ziyin tried to let go, the gate moved slowly. Don't let go! Don't let go! Ziyin warned Bei Qining with her own experience. Got it. Bei Qining was excited. Look, we really stopped the door. It's really stopped. Yes. Ziyin looked at the safely controlled gate, and her mood suddenly escalated. I wish they could come quickly. Certainly, even if you don't believe in Nangong's strength, you should also believe in Luo's luck. Bei Qining nodded solemnly. However, Bei Qining and Ziyin didn't expect that the day Su Luo and Nangong Luyan came back was far in indefinite future. The gate was not closing, all relying on Bei Qining and Ziyin to continuously pouring their own spirit power. But this kind of thing is okay in a day, 2 days, 10 days, or 20 days, but for many months? Fortunately, before, they got a lot of crystal stones because of Su Luo, so they were still able to withstand, but it seemed that they may not be able to withstand it for long. What about Su Luo at this time? She was completely immersed in the problem before her. 64 petals, fused into 32? Su Luo was completely helpless at first, but when she incorporated the principle of the space gravity into it, she got an idea. Su Luo simply took out the pen and paper and began to calculate the formula of the space gravity's law one by one. Countless papers are scattered on the ground. Su Luo was haggard and bloodshot, but her eyes were full of energy. Suddenly, she yelled, "I see." Then she jumped up and cheered. At this moment, Nangong Luoyun slowly opened his cold eyes. "What's wrong?" It was still a faint voice, but very amiable that could make people shed tears. "You finally wake up?" Su Luo couldn't restrain her excitement, plunged into his arms all of a sudden, hugged him tightly, and never let go. Nangong Luoyun's pale lips formed a slight smile, lovingly stroking her silky black hair with a soft voice. "Miss me?" "Amen." This time Su Luo didn't conceal her love and nodded solemnly. "I miss you." These 3 words, spreading a very comfortable feeling to Nangong Luoyun, his smile deepened. For these 3 words, no matter how serious the injury is, it was worth it. "Why did you shout just now?" Nangong Luoyun said with hint of curiosity. "Oh, by the way, seeing you wake up, I get overexcited, so I forgot such an important thing." Su Luo pushed away Nangong Luoyun, turned, and walked toward the motionless air. Although it was uncomfortable to be pushed away, Su Luo let Nangong Luoyun taste the fact that she cared for him, so he reluctantly let her go and wait to settle the account with her. Chapter 1820. Departure 1. Nangong Luoyun stood up slowly, with graceful posture. He watched Su Luo as she busied herself. "What are you doing?" he asked leisurely. "Combine these 64 petals into 32. Su Luo pursed her lips. "But this space is motionless. I can't move them at all. And once people go up, they would be trapped. It's very difficult." "Very difficult?" Nangong Luoyun's white and slender fingertips slightly raised Su Luo's sharp chin. Su Luo didn't give him a good look. "Naturally, it's difficult." As soon as she finished speaking, Su Luo began to turn around. Her clothes were fluttering like a fish in the quiet air. Very beautiful. Su Luo's speed was very fast, only to see her sleeves raised and turn quickly. She picked up one petal and put it on the other. After that, the 2 petals began to fuse at a rate that visible to the naked eye. The stars were flickering, the light was brilliant and vibrant in colors. After a while, the 2 petals were finally fused into one. If you look at it carefully, you couldn't see any flaws or marks. There was a slight smile on the corner of Su Luo's mouth, and the smile even reached her eyes. In fact, she had known for a long time that the difficult problem of Yun Luo Red Lotus was not how to fuse 2 petals, but how to break the motionless and confined space. To put it more simply, as long as you could move freely in the confined space, the problem would be solved. Previously, Su Luo thought about this problem. Then she went to study her space gravity. But coincidentally, at that time in Su Luo's nothingness of space, the space gravity, there was 64 golden threads in her mind. So, in the whole year, Su Luo finally fused 64 threads in her mind into 32. At the moment when the fusion was completed, Su Luo found that her space gravity has been doubled. Then Su Luo had an idea in mind. She really understood the significance of this difficult problem given to her by the Yun Luo Red Lotus. In order to verify her conjecture, Su Luo quickly went up. In fact, her guess is completely correct. Just when Su Luo went up, Su Luo found that when she enveloped this small area by the enhanced space gravity, then she could be as free as a fish entering the water. All the problems were solved. Nangong Luoyun stood at the bottom, watching Su Luo, who was dancing like a butterfly in the air with a light smile on his face. In this year's time, his Luo had finally grown up, and her strength had also increased a lot. If he didn't guess wrong, she only needed an opportunity to be promoted to the commander rank. Nangong Luoyun with his eyes narrowed, suddenly found a fact that frustrated him. That is, when he was around, Su Luo always depended on him and would not take the initiative to promote herself. Her cultivation was not fast, but when he was not around, when she had to be on her own, her strength would improve rapidly. Does it mean that in order to let her improve her strength, he had to leave heartlessly? This was really a sad story. Nangong Luyun held his forehead with one hand and drew his mouth silently. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.